Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on YouTube for our very first YouTube Live. I have no idea what this looks like at the moment, but we're just going to go with it. My name is Rotis Green and I run Rassawale Masters, and we're doing a very last minute Valentine's Day cook-along. I have got my Facebook feed set up here as well, so if you miss it, if you miss YouTube or if you're not watching it, then you can catch up there. So without further ado, we will just talk through some of the ingredients. Now, at the end of this live feed, I will list all the ingredients in the description box. But for now, I'm just going to talk you through it. If you have joined me, thank you so much. Please put something in the comments so I know that you're here. And if something's not working or if you can't see something clearly, then please let me know. Because the whole point of this today is to make sure that we can do this over and over again. So here we go. Let us, whoops, let's disconnect that. It is a house full of kids, so I do apologize if you see any mess. Here is the good stuff. So, and I've just realized that this is all mirrored. All right then, let's go with that. We've got the ingredients all set up here. We've got some sliced onions ready for the curry and the bhajis as well. I've got a tin and a half of chopped tomatoes. I'm cooking for more than 3 or 4 people today, so I've got 1.5 tins, and half a tin is still in the tin. We'll use that. I've got fresh spinach for the bhajis. I have some. Whoops, there we go. I have some potatoes that have been peeled and chopped, and they're really just like bite-sized pieces. We have some ginger and garlic paste. Whoops, where is it? There. I've got some ginger juliennes as well, which you can use if you'd like. They're not essential, but we can use them to garnish the curry when it's done. And I've got some fresh ginger and lemon for the chutney that we're going to do. I've also got some chapati flour, and the rice is measured out. Typically, 1 cup of rice will be plenty for 4 people in a family. So I've got 1 cup there, just dry at the moment. So let us put the back down there. And I'm just going to adjust this so that you can see what I'm doing. There, I think that for now is going to be okay. The camera will probably keep moving around as and when I am doing different bits. I've got my glass of wine because it's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, and we'll put that to one side. But other than that, this is very much an experiment today. We will still have some very good food at the end of it. So I am really counting on that as a redemption thing. So here we go. I wish we could put some music on, but we can't. So the first thing we're going to start with is we're going to do the curry. Now, Rassawale aloo or my mum's Bombay potatoes are absolutely simple and so tasty, full of flavor to do. So the first thing we're going to do is get our pan on at about a medium to high heat. I've got an induction, so I've got it up to 7. I'm going to use some cooking spray, but if you don't want to use cooking spray and just use a couple of teaspoons of oil, that's fine as well. I'm just going to spray a little bit just to get the spices going a bit. So we'll let that oil heat up. And I'm going to move my Facebook feed slightly so you can actually see me cooking. There you go. Lots of people on the Facebook feed, which is always lovely to see. Let's move you a bit closer to the camera, to the food. There we go. So you can see what I'm doing. That's still coming along nicely. Thank you very much for sticking with me. I wonder if I can zoom in. Yeah, I can zoom in. Woohoo! There we go. That's a bit better. This is probably the first time you're seeing me use. If you're a regular with our Facebook cookalong, this is probably the first time you've seen me use one of these masala dabbas. Mainly because I cook Indian food all the time, but and these spices are just not enough for me. I feel like I need more. So first thing to go in here is going to be some cumin seeds. I've got my cumin seeds here. I'll take it out so you can see it. First thing is the cumin seeds, and I'm just going to put about a teaspoon in. Next we have, so I've got some asafoetida here. It's from Tesco's. Where are you? There. It's from Tesco's. You can use this if you like. If you don't have any in, that's not a problem. It just gives it, it negates sort of the negative, it negates some of the harmful effects of the spices. It adds a little bit of flavor, so you only need a sprinkling. Too much and it's going to be too strong. And then I have some fennel seeds, which I'm just going to add about a teaspoon of fennel seeds. And we shall give it a mix. Fennel and nigella seeds to me are what make Bombay potatoes what they are. And of course the finishing touch of ginger, but that's not essential. Right, next we're going to add some onions. Not all of them, because we're saving some for the onion bhajis. If you've already chopped them separately, some for onion bhajis, some for your, let me take them out, some for the curry, then only add your curry onions to the pan at this point. So that's what we're doing at the moment, just adding the curry onions to your pan. We'll give those a mix. Now, the most important thing when cooking onions for a curry is that you have to cook them to a point depending on how you would like your curry to taste. So if you're doing a naturally sweet tasting curry, which this effectively is, it's like a sweet and sour kind of mildly sweet and sour curry. So you don't need to cook these for very long. They will literally only need maybe 5 or 10 minutes just to get nice and translucent and not very brown at all, because it's nice to be able to bite into these onions when you're eating your curry at the end. So we're not going to cook it for very long. What I will do is I'm going to add just a sprinkling of salt, and that will help just to bring out the moisture in these onions. And as that happens, these onions will get softer a little bit quickly. You can also sweat these onions. So you could put a lid on it and just sweat these onions down. The reason we're doing the curry first is because we haven't boiled the potatoes, and the potatoes are going to boil in the liquid that we put in the curry. So they're going to take a little bit long to do until they are completely tender and ready to eat. And that will give us time to do everything else that we need to do while this curry just sits on the back burner and cooks. So after I've been stirring it, and I don't really want to stir it any further, I'm just going to put a lid on it and turn the heat down a little bit and allow it to sort of cook out for a little while. And whilst that's happening, we shall move on and just mix our bhaji mixture. I absolutely love onion bhajis. If you've been a Masala Masters follower for a while, you'll know that we all love our onion bhajis. So I'm just going to move this across, turn that off so you can see what I'm doing. And probably should put mat or something on it. Yeah, that's fine. So You can see that. That's sweating away. And I'm going to get the remainder of our onions for our bhajis in there. I am saying bhajis, but actually in India, where I come from, they're pronounced bhaji. A very nice, strong emphasis on the BH. So bh, practically no ah sound. And then the JI is the same as bhajis. So they're called bhaji in Maharashtra and around that area. Elsewhere in the country, they're called different things, pakoras, or they're called bhajis. And it really does not matter what you call them. They're basically fritters with a little bit of flour and a little bit of other ingredients, nice and usually quite universal in terms of their palate. So most people will be able to eat the same one. You can make them as spicy or as mild as you like. You can make chili pakoras, you can make aubergine and courgette pakoras, which is something quite popular with our audience as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the mixture without adding any water. We're going to add spices to our onions. And these are what I like to call our usual suspects. So we've got some cumin. Got about a teaspoon, maybe a little bit more, because I like cumin. I have some Kashmiri chili powder, which is a nice medium to mild chili powder, but it has a beautiful red color. So I'm putting some Kashmiri red chili powder in there. This one is entirely up to you how much you put in. I'm putting just about a teaspoon. I have about half a teaspoon of turmeric. And some ground coriander. Now, normally, if I'm making just onion bhajis, I will not add ground coriander. But with spinach, it does taste really nice. So I'm adding about a good heaped teaspoon of coriander. Now, my spoon here is tiny. It's one of those masala spoons, which is why it looks like I'm putting loads and loads in, but I'm not. It's just a tiny spoon. But that's about a nice heaped teaspoon of ground coriander. Sprinkling of salt. I'm starting to smell my onions. They're starting to go a little bit too dark for my liking. So I'm just going to open that up and give that a mix. They're going nice and limp now. So we'll give that a mix and cover them back up again just to let them cook a little bit longer. So we've got our salt in there as well, and the salt is really going to be very helpful in releasing all of that lovely liquid from the onions. I have cleaned my worktop, so I'm just going to pop this back in so it doesn't get wasted. Just give it a mix. And we're going to leave that as it is now. I am not adding any of the fresh spinach to it just yet. Spinach will not take long to wilt as soon as it is added to spices. And I don't want to wilt our spinach just yet. What we're going to do is after we've added our chickpea flour to this mixture, we're going to mix the fresh spinach in then. And what that'll do is it'll still leave those spinach leaves quite nice and crisp. So when you fry them, you get big chunks of spinach and they're just absolutely delicious in your mouth. So I've got a lid for this bowl, but if you don't have a lid, that's absolutely fine as well. I'm just going to put a lid on and we're going to set this aside until the very end when we need it. So I'm going to set that aside. We'll move that off again and get back to our curry. Give that a quick wipe. This is the beauty of induction, to be able to wipe off anything without creating too much of a mess. If my husband's watching this, he's going to wish I do this all the time, which I don't. So let's move this back here so you can see what's going on. Yeah, that's looking absolutely fine. So as you can see, they still have a little bit of texture to them. They're not completely cooked down, just pointing for the sake of Facebook as well. They're quite, they're still, some of them are still nice and crunchy, which is what we want, because what's going to happen now is once the ginger and garlic paste goes in and the tomatoes go in, sorry, it's going to help the onions cook a little bit more. But what it'll do is instead of charring the onions, it'll just boil them. And what that does is it retains that sweet, natural sweetness from onions, and gives it, adds, basically infuses your dish. So the next thing to go in there is going to be ginger and garlic paste. Now, I like to add a good 2 teaspoons, but it's up to you how much flavor you want. It's not going to be completely cooked out, so you will get that hint of ginger and garlic quite nicely through your curry. I am now going to turn the heat up because we need to add the tomatoes in, and we do need to cook them quite quickly. So once this ginger and garlic starts to, as soon as you can start smelling it, we're going to add our nigella seeds. Now, the reason I'm adding nigella seeds at this point is because if we had added them too soon, they would have burnt while the onions were cooking. But I'm going to add some nigella seeds now, because as soon as we add them in, we're going to roast them for a couple of minutes and then add our tomatoes. And then those nigella seeds are going to nicely infuse our tomatoes. So here we go. About a teaspoon of nigella seeds. Again, if you like nigella seeds and would like it to be a stronger flavor, feel free. You can add more than that. Oh, this already smells amazing. Right, a couple of minutes of quite a lot of tomato there, but the basic flavor of this curry is tomatoes. Not so much the onions, but definitely more tomatoey, for my money, more of a runny tomatoey curry. So that's what we're doing. That's why we need loads of tomatoes. If you're using fresh tomatoes, you need to make sure that they are absolutely ripe to the point of being squishy. And vine tomatoes preferably, because they're full of flavor, or any other strongly flavored tomatoes, because there is a natural tanginess that comes to this dish through these tomatoes. So we're going to just heat this on full heat because these were cold. Completely on high heat, we're cooking it so that it comes to a good boil. I'll just put that in. And that's going to start bubbling away. I've just realized that perhaps there's not enough light on my YouTube feed here. So once I've put a lid on that and you can watch it cooking, I'm going to go in. You can see it better. So that's cooking away. Now, as I mentioned before, it's wholly dependent on what kind of a curry you're cooking. So as with the onions, we didn't cook that for very long, and it's the same thing with these tomatoes. We do need to dry them out just a little bit, because Drying tomatoes and onions out means that they will retain most of the flavor that you put into it. So any spices that we add to this at this point, the last thing you want to do is to water them down. And that's why we're just going to cook this out till some of this excess moisture is gone. And once that excess moisture is gone, we'll add our spices and then cover it, and the potatoes, and then cover it and allow it to cook, at which point we can move on and do something else. But I'm just going to leave you with these nicely bubbling tomatoes for a few minutes while I go and grab a light so you can see this better. Just trying to reach for a plug socket. This is the sort of thing that should have been done in the trial run. Nearly there. How are we doing? Is that better? Yeah, that's better, isn't it? So that should show you that the sauce is thickening up and it's actually starting to lose a little bit of its moisture. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So any sort of the really liquidy texture of the tinned tomatoes should be drying out. Now, of course, if you're using fresh tomatoes, then you won't have as much liquid in it as chopped tomatoes does. So you may well be at the point where you feel, oh, this is drying out too much, which is fine. It just means that it is concentrated quite a bit, and that will only help with soaking up your flavor. If it looks as though your pan is starting to burn at the bottom, by all means turn it off for a few minutes until we're ready to add some spices to this. I think I'm about ready to add some spices to this now. The thing you've got to remember is that although it seems like this is not quite cooked, to me that's what it looks like, because normally when I'm cooking a curry, I'd be breaking this down right to the end until it becomes like reduces down to half its quantity and becomes a paste that I can literally fold over. But this curry does not need you to do that. It is so quick and easy that you could use obviously everything that you have in the house. If you've got a tin of tomatoes, you could just use passata. If you don't have a tin of tomatoes, but just turn that down now while I add the spices. So we've got our usual suspects again, about half teaspoon of turmeric. I'm putting a teaspoon of red chili powder, some ground coriander, and another little sprinkling of salt. Now we did add some salt to the onions, so just be careful how much salt we add into this at the moment, because you can always add more later on. You can't take it out. So, and the potatoes, because we're cooking this with potatoes, you might actually need a little bit more just to infuse the potatoes with salt, because those will absorb the salt from your sauce. But we'll just mix that in and bring it to a nice boil. Turn it up again. It's an extremely simple curry to make, so you've got very, very straightforward ingredients. Just keep an eye on the tomatoes because they do tend to splutter a lot and it will splash you. Right, so we'll turn that down. Next in goes our main ingredient, the potatoes. Now I'm doing these with potatoes because that's what I grew up with. But you can add any kind of vegetables to this that don't have a strong natural flavor. So I would keep away from stuff like broccoli or really just broccoli. I wouldn't add broccoli to this because it has a really strong flavor to it. But I would add things like cauliflower, peas, green beans, maybe not aubergine because that just gets really mushy. But courgettes, chunks of courgettes would be amazing in this. Anything that has like a really mild natural flavor would go really well with this dish because those tomatoes will then really shine through. And then we just cover these up. Now, the mistake I've often made with this is I've not added enough liquid for these potatoes to boil. So here's a challenge for us today to see if I can get these potatoes to cook by the time we're ready to finish this video. Because usually I'm having to keep adding more water and allow them to cook because I have all that time in the world. But today I'm hoping that this will be ready by the time we've finished cooking. So at this point, what I'm going to do is, normally I wouldn't add water right until the end, but I'm going to add some water to this today, just to give those potatoes a little bit more liquid to cook with. So I've got about, I'd say, a cup and a half of water there. If you think you've got enough liquid in your dish, feel free to not add this to not do this step. But I would recommend to get those potatoes cooking to add a cup or so of water. Just imagine trying to boil potatoes from raw and what you might need to do to them in order to cook them. So that's basically what I've done. And we shall wait for this to come to a full boil. And then we can move on to the next step, which is going to be our chapati dough. Let's get that ready. And I've got some water there, ready for that. Have a glass of wine while we wait. Not glass, I'd recommend a sip. Don't have a glass of wine because you might not finish cooking. Any questions so far? Does anyone have any questions? I'm checking quickly the Facebook feed as well, just to make sure everybody's okay. I don't see any questions there. Nope, no questions, that's fine. Not a problem at all. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them and I will do my best to answer. Thank you everyone who's joined me on Facebook, and I can't really see on YouTube how many people have joined in. So I do apologize for that, seeing as this was an experiment for YouTube. But hopefully whoever is joined in can see what I'm doing and it's all working fine. Thank you very much. That's boiling away nicely now. But let's just give it a couple more minutes. I need a wingman. That's what I need. I need a wingman to check the messages coming through and let me know if we're actually getting anything. Because then I find myself talking to myself, and that's strange. Okay, so I'm just looking for my lid. Here we are. Still letting that come to a nice furious boil before we turn it down. If I was to turn it down right now, it would still cook, but I think it'd probably take too long. So I'm just waiting for this to come to a nice furious boil, and then we will turn it down and leave it to cook. Got my shield ready. Looks like a shield. I like that we're cooking on this live show a full meal effectively. You could do a little salad on the side if you like. Typically in India, with any kind of full meal, you would have some sliced onions, tomatoes, cucumber with a squirt of lemon juice on it. And that would just be served alongside your food. You would also normally have a vegetable dish to go along with this this potato curry, especially because there aren't any vegetables in this. But if you put vegetables in it, then that's all you need. You don't really need much else beyond that. So the next thing we're going to do is I am going to just adjust this camera a little bit so you can see what I'm doing with the rotis. Now, I would swap this around, but it would then mean that those potatoes are going to get So let's just move you further so you can see what I'm doing with the atta. And Facebook, you can tip down a bit as well. Now, just as a quick look, this is furiously boiling now, so I'm going to turn it down to 5. which is like a nice medium heat, 4 even. Right, let's get into the atta for these rotis. Now, this is chapati flour, which is a wholemeal flour, and it's really finely ground, traditionally ground in a mill, but it is a whole wheat flour. It's not plain flour as such, but you can use a mixture, half and half, of wholemeal and plain flour. And what we're going to do is typically 1 cup sort of works out for, I'd say, 3 to 4 people. I've got maybe 2 cups, just a little bit more here because we do love our rotis in this house. And the good thing about this flour is that you can just keep it in the fridge. If you don't end up using all of it today, this dough, I mean, you can keep it in the fridge and just use it over the next week. They're fantastic to make little flatbreads, which, you know, taste great, and they're healthy and they don't really have any fat in them. So first thing I'm doing is I'm going to make a well in the middle of this bowl so that I can see the bottom of the bowl. I'll just bring that up closer to you so you can see it. In the middle of the bowl, just make a little well, and then we're going to add just enough water so that it reaches sort of the top of the well. Just that. And then you can go in straight with your hands if you like, or you can start off with a spoon. I'm going to do that so I'm not wasting too much time washing my hands. So all we're doing is mixing it in. And in terms of ingredients, that's about it. This dough is extremely versatile, so you can use it for rotis, you can use it for parathas. We're using this today for puris and rotis. I'll show you both flatbreads. One is a fried bread, one is a flatbread, and they're super simple to make. I'm going to attempt cooking hours on our portable camping stove. If it works, great. If it doesn't, that's another experiment for another day. I'm trying to do that live on camera. So I've got rid of the spoon now because I really just want to go in and feel this to make sure I have enough flour and water. That feels a little bit dry, so I'm going to add a little bit more water. It's a lot easier to go little by little on this because too much water and it does make it quite sticky. You could just keep adding flour, but then you'll end up with a 3-month supply of chapati flour, chapati dough, which is not great. You could freeze it. You could freeze it if you tend to make too much, and then you just thaw it out overnight, and then it's ready to use. But otherwise, it's just a case of kneading it. There isn't really any technique to this. As long as you are squashing and squeezing and bringing it all together, that's all that matters. This is still a little bit tough, so I'm going to add a touch more water. We're going to let this sit for until we're ready to use it. So it will release, the gluten will loosen up a little bit. If you are gluten-free, then you can by all means leave this step out. This curry is just as good with rice as it is with rotis. You can make gluten-free flatbreads if that's what you're doing. There are some amazing gluten-free flatbreads that are made in India with things like spelt flour and millet flours, rice flour even, or tapioca flour. Some really, really nice flatbreads that you can make. So that's sort of coming together now. And at this stage, I'm just going to grab a board. and just knead it for a few minutes. Like I said, there's no technique involved in kneading this. There's no stretching and folding. It's just like my mum used to say, until your hands are clean, which they nearly are, you just have to knead it until it's a little bit smooth. Now, my grandma's dough would probably be a lot looser than this. This is quite tough, but this is what works for me. When I'm doing chapatis, it helps me if the dough is slightly tougher, because this, remember this, as it sits, is going to loosen up a bit. And if you already need, or if you put together a really loose dough, it gets a little bit difficult to roll it out later on. It's great exercise for your arms. So I'm quite happy with that. It was only a couple of minutes of extra kneading. I know there are some cracks in it still, but because it's a whole wheat flour, that doesn't really bother me too much. And because we don't really need to stretch it out as such, it won't be as elastic as your usual bread dough. It's pretty flat, and I'm not too bothered about it breaking up at the moment. You'll see once it's rested, and when we knead it again, that's when you'll see how nice and smooth it is. So she says that really confidently and hoping that this is going to work. So I've got another little bowl here with a lid. I'd recommend putting either a lid or a damp tea towel on this. The last thing you want is the top of your dough to dry out, because when you're rolling it out, then you'll get little crusty bits on your roti. So I've got that, and that's going to be sitting to one side until it's ready for us to use. Now then, next step, we're going to wash the rice. Move these things out of the way. Give it a good swipe. Okay, so here's the rice. I've got 1 cup of rice in here. Now, typically 1 cup of rice is plenty for 4 people. If you want to get down to figures, it's about 200 grams of rice. You can have 200 to 220 is about how much you would need per person. Now, I say that based on having flatbreads, curry, a sabzi on the side, or a vegetable dish, and a salad, and rice. If you're just doing curry and rice, you would know best how much rice you want to cook. For us as a family, with 2 children who eat, pretty much regular portions, 1 cup of rice for a meal is plenty, because then we have the rotis and everything else as well. But if I'm doing it just as a curry and rice thing, I'd usually double that, just in case anyone fancied a little bit extra. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to wash this. Now, just cold water, which I will top up so we can do it again. Really important to wash rice unless you're planning to do sticky rice. Most of the starch, once it's washed out, your rice will be nice and flaky, and you won't really need to drain it or anything like that. The water that we put in the end will be clear, and it will just soak into the rice and make it nice and fluffy, so you don't feel like it's bitty in your mouth. See how milky that water is? That is all your starch. Facebook can already see it because it's quite close to that. I'm just going to point it out to you. You see how milky that rice is, the water is? That needs to be washed out now. So that I'm just going to go and pour it down the sink, leave the rice in there, and we're going to do that, wash it again about 2 or 3 times. So just pour some more cold water in. Better to do this with cold water because with hot water it'll just take a little bit longer. And if you have the time to soak your rice, that's even better. Soaking your rice for about 15 to 20 minutes before you start cooking it will also help the rice to just open up a little bit more and not be sticky. So that's still quite milky. And we'll do it one more time. Now, once I've poured this water out, I'm going to put 1.5 cups of clean water or tap water in this, ready for the rice to cook. Already you can see that's making a difference. We've washed it twice, and now that isn't as milky as the water that was before. So I'm going to pour that out, and I'm going to put 1.5 cups of water. Typically, 1 cup of rice to 1.5 cups of water works. Sometimes, and Darren does this and he makes very good rice, he puts 2 cups of water per cup of rice. So it's up to you. It's just 2 different ways of doing things. I would say 1.5 cups, but 2 cups works as well. So that has the water that it needs now. Just for the sake of keeping our front rings free, I'm going to, whoops-a-daisy, give the bottom of that a wipe and put it on the back ring here so that we've got access to the front too. That goes on full blast for now. You can add, and that's just a bit of water, you can add some flavorings to the rice. You can add some whole spices or some cumin to it, or if you'd like some black pepper. That's the other thing I forgot to put in the potato curry, which we will do in a second. But you can add bay leaves, cinnamon, cloves, all sorts of things to that, just to infuse the rice. You can add some turmeric if you want to add a bit of color, but I personally don't tend to add turmeric to the rice, but you can do if you like. So we're just waiting for that to come to a full boil. In the meantime, let's put some cracked black pepper in our curry, which I forgot to do before. Just roughly cracked. Probably shouldn't do this on the induction hob. You may not know this, but cracked black pepper is the original Indian spice. When spice traders came to India, this is the spice treasure that they were after. There we go. That black pepper just gives it a beautiful little zing. Right, so I'm going to garnish this now with a little bit of fresh coriander, just so that it starts infusing that curry. I'll put the lid back on and let it carry on cooking. The rice is coming to a beautiful boil, so down to about medium, and on goes the lid. Now, I've got a little vent here, like a little hole for the steam to escape. If you don't have that in your lid, then just put it a little bit skew, not completely, just slightly skew, so that it doesn't boil over. But once all the water is soaked through, then we're going to completely close the lid, plug any holes, and that'll help to just finish steaming off the rice. So for now, I've got a vent, so I'm just going to leave it completely on. But if you haven't got a vent, leave it slightly skew, and then it will carry on cooking. Next steps. I'm just going to wipe the steam off that ring. This is where my induction hob starts to give way a bit, because all 4 rings work on different temperatures. So we've not got, whoops, there we go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just solving the family problem for a moment. Okay, what we'll do next then, while we give this rice some time to cook, we'll just finish mixing our bhaji mix. So let's take a look at our onions like we did before. There we go. So that is what it looks like now. It's still fairly dry. That's probably because I use sea salt. If you use regular salt, that's going to have broken down a lot more. I'm just going to go in with my hands now and break this down even further. As you squash it, your onions will start to feel even more wet, and the spices are going to start, the color of that red chili powder has just come through as you squash it. The reason behind doing this is to just get your onions nice and wet, because the last thing you want to do for nice crispy bhajis is to get too much liquid into that batter. Really, it ends up with a really sticky kind of consistency for the finished batter, if you want to call it that. It's not really a runny batter. It's a sticky dough almost. So just from about 5 to 10 seconds of mixing it, you can see how much color that Kashmiri chili powder has given out. That's just a naturally high red pigment chili powder. You see the color of that? Your bhajis are naturally going to be colored beautiful color without having to add any kind of without having to cook them for too long. Sorry, my brain was doing 3 different things on that one. Next thing we'll do is we'll add our chickpea flour. Now, it's important to add this chickpea flour a little bit at a time, because as you mix it in, it doesn't have any kind of gluten, chickpea flour, so it's going to start turning itself into a batter, and you don't want it to be too runny. So we'll add it like about a tablespoonful at a time. I know I've got enough there to start with 2. And we mix it in. If you're uncomfortable using your hands for this step, please feel free to use a spoon. It doesn't have to be your hands. I just like it because I can feel the texture of things. So I like using my hands. Make sure you squash it down really nicely, because again, that's going to keep releasing that moisture from the onions. You see how it's turning into almost like a dough. And that's what you're looking for. What you're looking for, because we're going to add spinach to this, I just need these onions to work a little bit harder and release more liquid. Now, it might seem that there's not enough in there. You might be very tempted at this point to add water to this, but I would strongly recommend that you don't, because the longer this sits, the more liquidy it will get. So we're going to do some rotis before we do bhajis, and in the time that we make rotis, this is going to disintegrate even more. So I'm not going to add the spinach just yet. Like I said, we'll add the spinach right at the end, but I'm just going to leave this now as it is. With or without a lid, it doesn't really make a difference. But I'm just going to keep it with a lid on just in case any nasty things fall into it. But we'll move that out of the way. Quick hand wash. Right. Let's not forget we were going to make a dip. So this is probably one of my most favorite dips to make and to eat. It is such a versatile dip. You can use it for a topping, a dipping sauce. You could use it as a spread. So many different things you can do with it. You could just use it as a marinade, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, of course, if you don't like coriander, then it's not going to do much for you. But if you do like coriander, then this is probably one that you might want to save to your recipe list, because it's a really, really nice dip. Sorry, I've got a few people still watching on Facebook. So the first thing that goes in here is a nice bunch of fresh coriander. We do love this dip in this house, and the coriander just blends down to nothing. So I'm just using a whole bunch for this. There, that goes in. Normally I would add green chilies to this, but we've been a bit unlucky with the flavor of green chilies that we've had, so I'm not going to spoil it. I've got some root ginger here. If you like the flavor of ginger, you can add a little bit extra here. I've got some salt and cumin seeds, about a teaspoon. And a lovely squeeze of lemon. I've got a quarter of a lemon here, but you can add a little bit more if you like. I'd recommend leaving it for now, but you can taste it later on. And if you feel you want it more citrusy, you can always add the lemon juice afterwards. Trying to keep the seeds out. My daughter's been saving these seeds because she wants to plant them. Great fun. Don't know till you try. Right, so I'm going to add a little bit of water to this. Now, the only thing we need to watch is we don't add too much water to it. There's two reasons for that. Coriander will blend down to nothing. So if you add too much water, it's not going to allow that coriander to blend down to a smooth paste. And really, for this dip, you want it to be beautiful, smooth, pasty kind of consistency. And once you've blended it down and it's nice and smooth, then you can add water to adjust the consistency of it. So I'd recommend, unless you've got a blender that's not going to do this, I'd recommend just adding maybe 3 to 4 tablespoons of water to this to start with. So just a touch of water, and we'll blend it and see if we need any more. I'm just going to move a little bit further out and blend this, because otherwise I'll be deafening everyone. So Unless you want to see it. If you want to see it, I'll bring it round. Whoops, daisy. No, that's not going to happen. Right, let's blend. That needs a little bit more water for mine. There's no harm in just testing it and coming back, because again, like salt, you can add water if you need it, but you can't take it out. Unless you've got more coriander, you just keep dumping more coriander in it. And they loads of coriander in it. Not behaving itself today, is it? Yeah, probably needs a touch more. See what I mean about the coriander? It's quite disappointing just how much coriander you need to make a decent quantity of chutney. My mum has actually recommended adding a few fresh spinach leaves to this, so it does bulk it out a bit if you did that. That's it, totter over. Let's grab a bowl. Ooh, beautiful. I love that bright color. Now, if you wanted, you could add some mint to this. The only thing mint will do is that mint oxidizes a lot quicker than coriander, so it will make your dip go a bit of a dark green. This feels a little bit thick to me, so I'm going to add a touch of water and just blitz this a little bit more. It's nice and smooth, just the way I want it, but I'm just going to blitz it once more just to blend that water in nicely. Now, at any point, if you felt that this is too thin, you want it a little bit thicker, then you can add a tablespoonful of desiccated coconut and blend it down again. Coconut has the perfect ability to thicken something up with spoiling the taste of it, because it's quite nice and mild and actually lends a beautiful flavor to this dip. Look at the beautiful color of that. That's a true color, because I've got a light and it gives you a natural light. Ooh. Point it like that. There we go. So that is ready for when your bhajis are ready. You can either, I've got plenty of dip in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that as it is for now. And then once I've finished using that dip for bhajis, I'm just going to rinse that out with a little bit of tap water, add it to that, and I might use it as a marinade at some point. So that will sit in the fridge for about a week as well. Now we'll just take a look at how some of these things are looking and cooking, and then we can move on to the final two, which is rotis, puris, and bhajis. So let's see what our curry's doing. Let's move it back a bit. Curry's looking good, smelling good. Now, there might be a question out there, and you probably are wondering what would happen if you parboil these potatoes and put them in instead of just letting them cook in this sauce. The only thing I'll say is you could do that. There's nothing wrong with parboiling these potatoes once they're chopped and then adding them to the dish, because that will obviously speed up the process. The only thing I'll say is when these potatoes are super sharp, when you can see those super sharp angles, that actually adds to the aesthetic of the dish. And I mean, there's something amazing about serving a potato that looks practically uncooked, and then you break into it with the roti or something, and it's beautifully and fluffy and cooked. And that is a completely personal choice. But you could, if you wanted, parboil these potatoes and then add them to the curry sauce. It might mean that whilst they're cooking, some of the smaller pieces might get mushy and break down into the dish itself. As long as you're happy with that, I have no issues. These potatoes are still a long way off being cooked. So we'll just leave them and let them do what they're doing. Yep, some of them are getting there. The smaller pieces are getting there. So I'm just going to leave that and let it carry on cooking. We'll turn it up to 4. Check on the rice. I can see some of the steam coming out there. Perfect. Now, I hope you can see what that rice looks like. If you can't, I'm just going to give this camera a little bit of a wipe. Bear with me. Is that clearer or worse? I don't know. Anyway, so this rice, let's bring you up close and personal to it. Can you see the little holes in the top of the rice? That means that, what's going on? That means that the rice is about ready. So the holes are like steam holes, and the steam has been escaping from those holes all this time, and that means that if you can't see the liquid around it, that is about ready to be turned off. So I'm going to turn that rice off, and as we said, leave that lid on, and we need something to plug the hole. I shall find a clue. Something. Oh no, peppercorn. So I can just put a peppercorn on top of that, and that'll plug it. A clove works as well, but a peppercorn works just as fine. And all that's going to do is make sure all the steam that's in there stays inside. Now, of course, I've got rid of some of the steam when I opened it, but hopefully what that'll do is, as it steams, grains of that rice are going to start standing up on end. And that was my grandma's tip, that if the rice is standing up on end, that means it's ready. So let's then move on swiftly to rotis. Now that that is turned off, I can turn this one on and bring my pan in. I'm just going to quickly make some room behind so that we can roll out some rotis. That pan is on high heat. You can use any kind of flat skillet or a frying pan, and that works just as well. We'll have the ginger julienne ready there for later. Doing that. Garnish. Now then, let's move that. That's my basin spoon. Let's move you a bit further along so you can see what we're doing over here. got a box of flour here that I usually use just to dust the roti as we're rolling it. We've got our roti dough here. The pan's getting nice and smoky. That's a good sign. Once it starts to smoke, you can turn it down to about medium. The pan needs to be hot in order for us to cook it, because rotis need to be cooked really quickly. They shouldn't sit on there for too long, because if they do, they'll get sort of cardboardy, and finished once they're done and they're sitting and you're not ready to eat them quite yet, they'll be a little bit harder than you'd like, or crunchier, I should say. But as we talked about the texture of this atta or of this dough, initially, yeah, it was cracked. As you can still see, it's still quite cracked. But as you knead it, suddenly it's a lot smoother than it was. It's a lot easier to knead. If I'm missing questions, I do apologize. I will reply to them once we've finished. And for the next one, we'll sort out a wingman. So that, as you can tell, it's already a lot smoother than it was. It's a lot looser, and you can actually roll it out quite nicely now without too much effort. So we'll split 1/3 and 2/3, or half and half, because my children prefer puris with this one. So we'll do half and half, and I'll show you a couple of each dish, each flatbread. Right. If I can set up my little camping stove, I'm going to attempt to do that now. This is, for my money, this is the perfect one to make fluffy rotis on. Let's move you further back a bit. The only problem now is going to be YouTube, if you can see that. Pan is nice and hot. Oh, don't need that. So you want about just about golf size portion, 2 to 3 inches, nice and flat between your palms, like that. We dust it in a little bit of flour, so we're just making rotis at this point. Flatten it with your fingers and roll. Just nice, gently roll with a little bit of pressure. With practice, this will start to swivel around on its own. It's the one thing that I can't actually tell you how to do. It's just with practice. As long as you have even pressure all over the roti, it will swivel by itself. And you're not looking to make it extremely thin, although there are people who will make it quite thin. And this is sort of getting bigger than my pan at the moment, so I'm just going to have to go with it. Just on a dry pan that's gone in, and that will cook until some of the bubbles appear. Let's do this again. I'll take a slightly smaller bowl. Press it between your palms to make it nice and flat. Dust it with a little bit of flour and roll. Try not to use too much flour to coat this. Just a sprinkling is enough. Right. So as you can probably see, there are a few bubbles starting to appear on this one. There we go on Facebook. I hope you can see that. A few bubbles starting to appear there. So I'm going to flip it over and just allow it to cook completely on that side. And instantly it starts to puff up. Just in the interest of potentially using this gas hob, I'm just going to put it on there because it looks like it's about to go out. And then once that side is relatively done, pop it on the flame. And no, it's a failure for this first YouTube. But never mind, we can always use our pan. It smells, there's something so nice about a roti that has been puffed up on a live flame. Just the smell of it is phenomenal. There you go, that's ready. Right, I'm going to turn that off because that's not very powerful today. Probably needs a change of canister, but that roti is ready. Now, to keep this nice and soft, what you need is a tea towel. And if you just cover it, that works. Put that in. And allow that to do what it needs to do. So we'll make that roti and then we'll move on quickly to puris and bhajis. Once you've got an idea of how to do that, that's all that matters really. Move that out of the way so that you can come back closer. Bubbles. You flip it over and allow that to cook quite nicely on that second side. If you were just using an induction and not using a gas flame, then this is the way you would do it. Because I don't have a gas flame in this house apart from my little camping stove, which is disappointing. But you know, there are other ways of doing it. So you just allow it to cook all the way through on this side, and then we're going to flip it over again one time, and with gentle pressure along the edges, we're just going to keep moving that around. Very gentle pressure, and as you will see, the steam starts to move around within the layers of the roti, and it starts giving you a little puffiness all around. That's the steam cooking the inside of the roti. And there you go, it's done. Nice and fluffy. ready to go. Right, that's covered up and it's going to sit until we're ready to use it. Next step, I'm going to swap the skillet for my little wok. Now, if you don't have a wok, you can always use just a deep frying pan, and you only need maybe a couple of inches of oil in it. I've been using this over the last couple of days, and so I've got this oil ready to go. For puris, you're going to need slightly smaller dough balls because puris are typically small fried breads. So you need about, I'd say about a 50p piece, maybe a little bit larger. Of course, if you have a massive skillet and you want to make massive puris, you could do that. But I would recommend doing smaller ones. They're more fun. They look a little bit different. Let's do these to start with. But the thing to watch out is that you need your oil to be nice and hot. So this is on high. And while we wait for this to heat up, I'm just going to make same sort of concept again. We're just going to squash them between our hands and roll them to sort of flat circles. Because puris are fried at a really high temperature, it's easier to have some of them rolled out and ready, just so you can keep popping them in one after the other. If your oil temperature drops, the puri won't puff up as easily as it needs to. It'll be flat, and then that might make it again more brittle than soft and fluffy. So what I'm going to do with this now, again, the other tip is, whilst we use dry flour to make sure that the roti doesn't stick to the board, for puris, it's recommended that you use oil. Again, what that will do is it'll help to keep the puris nice and soft when you're going to eat it later, because as you can imagine, you wouldn't cook one puri and then eat it straight away. You'd cook them all. They would flatten out, but then if you use oil instead of flour, they'll stay soft and they won't be crunchy. If you want crunchy puris, then by all means put flour on them and then you can have crunchy puris. So all I'm doing really is sprinkling or spraying them with a bit of cooking spray and just coating them. Just giving them a little bit of a rub so that they're covered in that cooking spray. The other thing that happens when you fry puris at a high temperature, in oil that is at a high temperature, is that they don't absorb as much oil as they would do if your oil is not hot enough. If your oil is sort of medium or low, I wish I could tell you, but I've never really worked with them, so I wouldn't want to attempt that. But if your oil isn't hot enough, your puris are going to drink up a lot of that oil. And that's what makes them really fatty and greasy. And that's the last thing you need. So make sure your oil is nice and hot. A little bit of patience at the beginning saves you a lot of trouble. But also it gives us the opportunity to roll out these puris. So again, pressure, these will not swill around like rotis because obviously it's oil and that's sticky. You want to roll these out slightly thicker than your roti. So I reckon about 1 to 2 millimeters thickness. Okay, so first, if you can see that, but if not, I'll just show you that. It's not massively thin, but 1 to 2, I'd say 2 millimeters thick. And then we just start rolling the rest of these out. Avoid letting it fold over at any point because that will again keep it from puffing up in the oil. The good thing about this, doing the puris before we do the bhajis, is that one, they're ready for you to sit down and eat, but also that oil is nice and hot by then. Like puris, bhajis will also need your oil to be piping hot. And same concept, if it's low, they will absorb more oil. Whereas if it's nice and hot, they'll be flash fried and they won't be as fatty. Just Take your time. This is actually, I find this really cathartic. Just rolling rotis and puris out. Probably what relaxes me the most. There's an easy way to test if your oil is ready. And we'll do that in a moment. I can see it bubbling away, but let's not presume. Because the last thing you want is your puri to sink to the bottom of the pan and come out really horrible. So we shall sprinkle a touch of flour over the top, and it's sizzling straight away. That means this is ready to go. So I've got my slotted spoon ready, and the first puri going in. I hope you can all see that. And then you want gentle pressure. Again, just trying to dip that in. And that's starting to puff up. Brilliant. I don't think that's still hot enough yet. Just very gently bathing that and flipping it over. I wouldn't recommend flipping these over too many times because that will make them hard again. So the next thing you want to do is get a plate ready, which you've done before, and I should have instructed you to, but there you go. With some paper on. And that's it. Allow that to completely drain off any oil. There will be some oil in it because if it's popped whilst it's been cooking, some of the oil will have gone inside. But swiftly on to the next one. This is why it's handy just to have some rolled out and ready. There we go, that's more like it. Gentle pressure, that's better. Now that that's puffed up, you can just flip it over. These are so scrumptious. Kids absolutely love these puris. They go so well with all kinds of dishes, but particularly with this potato curry today. These Bombay potatoes, so good. Really nice with chickpea curry as well. Great with just a little bit of Indian pickle on the side. If you add a little bit of flavoring to the actual dough when you're making it, you can just eat it with yogurt or raita. There we go. So this is a good indicator of the fact that the oil is now hot enough. If your oil is not hot enough, that puri isn't going to puff up. The other thing the other reason why it might not puff up is if your dough hasn't been rested. Now, although it does not need rising, it does need to be rested for half an hour at least. Especially if you're making puris. Rotis, you can still get away with it because rotis generally don't tend to need much looking after. But if you want puffy, light, fluffy puris, then you definitely want your dough to rest for at least half an hour. And make sure you get all the excess oil off. And really, after I've done that fifth one, the only thing left to do is our bhajis, which shouldn't take too long at all. And then dinner's ready. No comments on there yet on the YouTube channel. And last one. If it doesn't puff up of its own accord, remember to keep bathing it, and that just helps it start to cook quicker. Flip it over. You can make puris with just plain flour as well. They will just be a little bit more elastic as you try to eat them later on. They won't break as easily, which is fine. Some people prefer that. But then they will need resting for quite a bit if you're using just plain flour. Right, so I'm going to stop with the puris there, and we'll put them to one side for now.
Yeah.
And the next thing we'll do is I'm going to put these dough balls in here, and I'll finish them later on for our dinner. But the next thing we're going to do then is to finish off very quickly our bhaji mixture. And as promised, again with my fingers or my hands, and already if you saw that when we first put it away, it was quite, you see what I mean? It's already loosened up quite a bit. It was nice and chunky when I first held it, but it's loosened up a lot. And this is what I meant. Especially if you use just regular salt and not sea salt, that's going to be quite watery at this point, because I can still hear my sea salt clunking around. So that's absolutely fine. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the spinach. It does look like a lot of spinach, but again, it will break down quite a bit. So the idea now is to incorporate the spinach and the onions together to the point where you don't have loose bits of spinach which don't have batter around them. It'll make sense when I show you in a moment what I've just said. It's great practice, this, especially since I've been writing the book. Trying to explain things in words rather than pictures or a video has just been a massive learning curve. So again, as I squash it, you can probably hear it, and it's not the most appealing sound for a lot of people, but it kind of gives you an idea as to what your mixture is going to feel like. It's quite wet, and it has broken down quite a bit. I'll just bring this over so you can see. It has broken down quite a bit. So at this stage, I'm going to add another spoonful of besan or chickpea flour, because what that's going to do is it's going to make it nice and sticky for me again, and then we are ready to fry. Just trying to coat it almost as if you had too sticky a dough and you're just trying to make it workable. That feels about right. The reason we're doing this, the reason we're taking so much care to make sure that this is not wet and that it has enough sort of dry flour in it, is because as soon as it goes in the oil, if this is too wet, your bhajis are going to be soft, and that's the last thing you want. Bhajis should be nice and crunchy, in my mind, or bhajis. Bhajis need to be crunchy and light so that you can eat lots of them without worrying that it's going to make you feel ill. You should be able to eat lots of bhajis, as many bhajis as you like. So I've just added another touch of dry chickpea flour to it, and that feels more closer to the texture that it was before we put it away. So without wasting too much time, if you're using a spoon or a fork, I recommend using another fork just to help you slide this mixture into your pan. I'm not going to give it a shape because again that won't allow it to cook all the way through. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a little bit of mixture in my hands and I'm going to start dropping it in small portions. And that's what you want to see, that it instantly starts cooking. I'm just going to use this bowl once more. Line it with a couple of kitchen paper. That spinach, because it wasn't in there for a very long time, hasn't released a lot of moisture. And so you can still get some nice whole leaves in there. As you can see, there's still some whole leaves in there. That's going to make it beautiful and crunchy. Our curry is still cooking, which is great. And that is about all you need. Because they're not dense, because they're not thick, these bhajis don't take very long at all. There we go. Spinach and onion bhajis. Let's carry on. Make some more, because I'm sure before I've had a chance to take a picture of this, they're going to disappear. As soon as I've said, right, the light's finished, we're going to charge in, and these bhajis are going to disappear. So I'm going to make plenty. Again, if your oil is not hot enough, it's not going to start cooking straight away. And that means that your bhajis may be limp, they might take a little bit longer, and also they will absorb a lot more oil. So it needs to be beautifully hot. Of course, the other side of it is, if your oil is too hot, they're going to brown far too quickly. So you know your hob the best. You can test it to start with a little bit of bhaji batter and see how that works. But I would say nice and hot, because it only takes a few 30 seconds or so for them to cook. And it's a good idea to just keep stirring them around so that they cook evenly. I'm just going to wash my hands really quickly. There we go. Now, this is the problem with my induction hob, that the heat just seems to decide that it's had enough. If anyone has any electrical knowledge and ideas about why that happens, please let me know, because it makes my food not taste very nice. And that's not very nice. Right, I'm going to turn that the ring off for now, and we'll just plate up this food because we are done. So, there's my massive plate. Now, hand on heart, even if these potatoes are not cooked, I'm going to plate them up anyway, because otherwise you will be here forever waiting for my potatoes to cook. So we're just going to pretend that they're ready. That wasn't a very good idea. move you back. It does smell really nice. If you'd like, at this point, you can add some ginger juliennes to this. Just to garnish it a little bit over the top, and just let it steam until we're ready to plate up. So without mixing it, I'm just going to leave it there. We've got rice. Let's check our rice. Has it done what we were hoping it would do? I think so. That looks pretty good. So if you can see, there are some rice that are sort of standing on end. Not sure how clear that is. I'm just going to use, no, let's not do that. Let's use a different slotted spoon. You can just break that up. That's good. Get some rice. Get more if you like, but for the sake of plating up, we'll leave that there. We've got some Bhajis. Very, very tasty. I've got my chutney. Got some Puris. Rotis. And let's turn that off. That looks so good. Smells great. Just want a little bit. This is why it's called Rassawale aloo. Rasa is this beautiful broth-like curry. It's not very thick. It's this is why it works so well with puris, because you can just soak all of that broth up with puris. Give that a wipe. I love fresh ginger on this, so I'm just going to pop a little bit of fresh ginger, some fresh coriander, and voila, there is our meal that has been cooked together for our YouTube live cook along. Woohoo! Let's turn it around this way. I'll take a picture of this, pop it on social media a little bit later on. If you have cooked with us today, please do share and let us know what you thought of it. There's our finished meal. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. I really, really hope that you've enjoyed it. As an experiment, I hope it worked. And I'm really hoping that I'll see some of your creations on the social media channels. I'll put all the ingredients in the description box once we're finished. But thank you very much. Take care. Just trying to work out how this finishes. Right, let's pause that there. Thank you. Take care. Just trying to stop this. End stream.